Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to Podcast 2. What is mindset and can it be taught? Path notes on combat stress, jumping out of planes, and old bets. The great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. John F. Kennedy. My mom remembers the day he was killed. She cried, and we're Canadian. I think he was one of those leaders who was so good, he had to go. In the last podcast, I spoke about power and how we each need to own our personal power. It's how we get ahead, how we achieve. If we believe we are powerless, we are, and there will be little, if any, movement forward. We won't risk it. We won't engage. We won't allow ourselves to have that which we don't believe we are capable of being or having. We have many examples of powerful people who put themselves out front and were killed for the example they were setting. We now have a kind of savior complex, a fear of being powerful because there will be consequences, punishment in some way. I absolutely felt that way. I grew up in a very controlling family where my uncle, not my father, my mother's brother, controlled the entire family through intimidation. My mother was bipolar and could do incredibly cruel things. And there I was, this headstrong, really gifted, highly sensitive person trying to survive in this environment. I was punished for speaking up, for challenging the status quo there. So I get it. But the answer for me was to leave the toxic environment and find like-minded people who value me and value what I value. Many people I have found have serious inner conflict with the concept of power, because we're programmed to think we'll become targets. How do we flip this dynamic around? There are lots of historical examples we can point at to prove that this is real. How do we make it okay to be strong and powerful? How do we become powerful? Well, the food we eat empowers or disempowers us. The people we have around us empower or disempower us. Those are our top two inputs, food and relationships. With those, we build our internal and external environments. Interesting people. I'm a CrossFitter. It's a recent thing. I had to change my identity to align with this new reality, and it's still a process. I was an artist, not an athlete. I counted on my creativity and ability to solve problems, not on my body. In the process of becoming this new version of me, which I like very much, I am listening to people I might not have before now, other athletes. One such person who I find highly entertaining and insightful is Elliot Hulse. What I'm coming to appreciate more all the time is how much we are on the same page. These athletes, coaches, mentors that I'm finding, because we're both saying mindset is everything. Athletics is a mind-body activity. There can be no separation. One of the things I really appreciate about Elliot is he's a smart dude. Anyone who starts reading philosophy in 6th grade because he's looking for a sense of self-identification that doesn't include race, doesn't include gender or social class, but places an emphasis on the concept of being a spiritual being having a physical experience, that person is starting out on a pathway the majority don't take. So he fully understands the mind-body connection, that exercising his body makes him healthy in body and mind. He's a feeler, not much of a calculator, very in tune with the movings of the universe, the tides, flow. So am I. What I've noticed in the last few months of CrossFit is incredible transformation on all levels. And again, that's the body-mind connection at work. We are an integrated system of integrated systems. Alter one, and the entire wiring is going to be affected. So to increase power in one area of your life, say physically, that has to play out across all domains, mentally, emotionally, socially. As within, so without. We don't contain that change. It has to flow throughout. When people are making emotional changes, they wonder why they get physical symptoms. When physical injuries or illness happens, people get emotional symptoms as well. We can't separate out these experiences from each other. To develop then, in no way can the body be left out. not in exercise, not in diet, not in self-care. It is the basis, and it affects our mind and our emotions to a great extent. What is mindset? By definition, it is the established set of attitudes held by someone. These can be useful or not, positive or not, successful or not. It's their attitude. Successful people often cite mindset as the key determining factor in how they got to where they are. Some people will say, you just have to decide. That's mindset. It's the ability to decide and stick with your decision and follow through. So is mindset a mental process, or is it useless without accompanying action? Is mindset such a powerful decision that action is a default reaction? I remember a time in my life when it was life or death time. I had been diagnosed with a potentially fatal autoimmune disease. I was 22. And I had this vision. Now, some of you listening will understand this even better than I do because you've actually done this. But in this vision, I'm standing in a plane in front of the side door, and the door is open. The cockpit was to my right, and I knew that there was no pilot. I also knew the plane eventually was going to go down. So I had to decide, was I going to stay on the plane knowing it was going to crash, or would I jump? Outside the door, it was completely black. No reference points. I didn't know if I was over land or water. I had no idea what was going to happen after I jumped. What do you think I did? Mindset to me is inner alignment. And to have strong inner alignment is to have a strong sense of self. To have a strong sense of self means you believe in yourself. Belief is what you think and how you feel about it. When you have that level of knowing, that's inner alignment. That inner alignment that we say is happening within us is at a heart level. I mean, we don't talk about this and point to our heads, right? We always point to our hearts or our guts when we speak of inner alignment. We find that center place on our body. That what you think and how you feel about it, that knowing, that combined thought feeling is now speaking to all of our mind, conscious mind and subconscious mind. That alignment is mindset. And baby, you are cooking with gas when you are that lined up. You can do anything. The war between darkness and light. A boy goes to see his grandfather. He says, I feel like there is a war going on inside of me. Like two hungry wolves are fighting each other and it doesn't stop. What do I do? The grandfather says, everyone has such a fight. Some are more aware than others, some feel it more acutely. The boy says, it's like one wolf is white and good, and I feel good some of the time, and the other wolf is black and angry and destroys things. I feel like him some of the time too. Which wolf will win? The grandfather says, the one you feed the most. Combat is a dark business. This isn't unicorns and rainbow stuff. It's dark, heavy, it gets in all the cracks. Bury, bottle it up, box it up in psychic boxes, try to stick it someplace out of the way. The lids come off at inconvenient times. Sometimes people think they can just suck it up. They wait. They remain silent. They struggle. They wait. They suffer sometimes unbearably and alone. They may try to tell their buddy. Their buddy may not know what to do to help. They depend on the military apparatus to support them. Typically, they aren't great at advocating for what they need. So they wait. They think the system is going to work for them. It often doesn't. They are often surprised, frustrated, angry, disillusioned that it hasn't. They sink. They sink further. It gets darker. The pit is deep. There are monsters there. They can't sleep. They do things so they won't remember how dark it's gotten. They become numb, detached, waiting, sometimes now just for it to end. And sometimes they make the final decision. The pause. That's often what happens when we start to speak, reaching for a beginning, only finding space. There's so much all crowded inside my head, and then there's the thought, why should I? Do you realize how much effort it will take to sort through my mind, isolate and organize my thoughts so I can make them come out of my mouth, so that I'll have them to give to you? Another pause, or a continuation of the same space, empty of sound, full of thoughts. And what if I hand them to you? There's no guarantee you'll hear, less that you'll understand, so why make the words come out? Dripping with shame and fear and blood, filling my mouth, the blood overflows, and the words hit the space. Looking away in case you're not there, it was too much. The blood drips down my face and hangs in the pause. How many people begin only to come to the pause and stop? Feel the pieces of memory inside like glass and stop. See the faces waiting, not really interested, afraid of what might be said, and stop. See the faces waiting, wanting to understand, but I don't think they can, so I stop. And the pause becomes a space so big it swallows me, making the blood run that no one sees. I wrote that poem for an event a few years ago to raise awareness about combat stress. How do you make the decision to keep fighting, or begin a fight, to continue on when you are sick, exhausted, and in pain, to overcome devastating loss? Can mindset be taught? And how is mindset connected to identity? How you see yourself and feel about yourself? Combat stress topic. Do you ever watch World War II movies? Often there's a scene of a man in a trench, and we know he's not okay. He's doing things that indicate to us that he's not okay. He suddenly may start singing or reciting poetry or saying the Lord's Prayer. He may just suddenly stop then, climb the ladder to get over the edge of the trench, and re-engages with the enemy. What just happened there? Disconnect, redirect, have a script, keep it in your boot. It's the protocol I teach to personnel. The man in the trench did this, but may not have understood the importance of it. Sometimes we become overwhelmed. It's not our fault. It happens. Sometimes the best thing we can do is take a step back, redirect our thinking, have a way to do that, then re-engage. Sounds simple. How do we do that? First, you have to know your current status. Always. Where are you in what the situation is? Know when you feel like you're escalating. This is self-awareness. When you are self-aware, you know when it's time to step out. From that place, even if it's just moments, you can recalibrate, regroup, get your boots under you again. The next step is redirect thought. We have to be able to override the kinds of thoughts that are filling up our mind, telling us that we're scared, can't do it, don't have enough, aren't good enough, this is going to go bad. What do you say to yourself right then that is powerful enough to override those kinds of thoughts? Have a script. Write it out. Do this long before you need it. Make it as powerful as you can. Choose the right words that are going to be positive trigger words when you say them in those situations where you feel overwhelmed. Keep it in your boot. That means keep it with you. Read it often. Memorize the script. Say it over and over until it becomes muscle memory, until it becomes the trigger. One thought has no power. Repeated thoughts have incredible power. Decide what will dominate your mind. Create your own trigger. What are you going to say? Know it. Step out. Trigger yourself. Re-engage. Disconnect, redirect, have a script, keep it in your boot. That bridging component between I have made a decision to engage and I am busy having a holy shit moment is the ability to redirect your thoughts, which we can do with protocols and practice. The more you can redirect your thoughts, which are empowering, the more tough shit you'll get through. The more tough shit you get through, the more solid your belief in yourself, your attitude, your mindset. The more solid you are, the more you are sure you will get through the next hard thing, and momentum is created. When you hit a wall and you find yourself in another moment of overwhelm, use a bridging component. What are you going to tell yourself that will get you redirected? There is a reason why goal setting, visualization, arousal control, and self-talk are the 4 components taught as part of a basic resiliency program. The more you practice those kinds of thoughts, the more you become a master of your own mind. The greater the vision you hold of yourself, the more belief you generate. And that's not arrogance. That's necessary. How you see yourself matters. My first military coaching client was an older vet who had served in both the British and Canadian armies. Then he did some private stuff in the Philippines mostly. He taught martial arts. And he was an alcoholic. He would have bouts of binge drinking while working with me. We'd be getting close to an appointment, and he'd just take off drinking for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. He cleaned his gun often because it was familiar. He entered the army when he was 16. When he was working with me, he was 65. He only knew how to be a soldier. He had worked civilian jobs for years, but in his mind, he was still a soldier. He hadn't been able to align with a new identity. He couldn't see himself any other way. He could never make the transition. He remained stuck in a version of himself that was never updated, couldn't move forward. He never had a now because he was always filling it up with then. He was the first soldier who ever said to me that blood has its own energy. When you're covered with someone else's, it isn't like anything else. The combination of the smell, the metallic taste in your mouth, the feeling it gives you when you're drenched in it, well, that memory doesn't go away. There are so many things I hear. Nightmares, broken sleep, headaches that don't end, having to be exhausted to sleep, push-ups in the middle of the night to be tired enough to sleep, betrayal by leadership, team members killed, teams pulled apart without being able to mourn their losses, no trust, wives don't know, not having anyone to confide in, realizing that what you thought you'd become when you signed up and what you are now have a great deal of space between them. So much fills the space. Guilt, unprocessed grief, anger, nothing. A lot of nothing. Unless you decide to put something else in there, unless you decide to fight to reclaim your own life, unless you start to see things differently, including yourself. There are many examples we could think of that are dark and difficult. You have to have a particular mindset to get through, to keep pushing, to see the crises as an opportunity, to put the work in training, to create the identity of a successful person and maintain that self-image. If mindset is attitude, and I think it is, and attitude is based on belief, which I think it is, here's the real kicker. What we believe is responsible for 100% of our behaviors, which dictate our outcomes. So to clarify, mindset is a powerful, positive sense of belief in yourself, which has to be learned and nurtured and maintained over time. Shine it up now and again. You need it. Leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. That's another JFK quote. Okay, so there have been a lot of wars. Thousands of years of wars. What are we doing differently now than what we did then? How are we leading and learning? Apart from technology, if you extract, which we can't do very well, but for the sake of discussion, if we could extract the technological advances out of war, and it was physical, psychological, social, moral, legal, that's not going to be complicated, is it? But it's not one man's battle or one team's battle. It is more complicated than that. Why do we do this continually across time? For generations, psychologists, army psychologists, tried to tell us that we are hardwired for aggression. We know that's not true. Enter into the conversation the concept of neuroplasticity. We create our realities. We create the pathways in our brains that create our behaviors. We can create new pathways that create new behaviors. We do not have to continually wage war. We can outgrow this process. We can do better. Not sure if ISIL knows about neuroplasticity or would care. My training philosophy. When I decided I was going to start doing this work, I knew some new training was going to be in order for me. Most people would think, well, combat stress, you're going to need a psychology degree. I disagreed, and that's not what I did. I took a tactical shooting course. It was important to me to develop reference points. I'm not military. I enlisted twice and didn't go either time. Fate had other plans. I'll tell you that story some other time. But I'm not military, and I knew I had some bridging to do. I wanted to know, what is it like clearing a building in the dark? Those kinds of things, those kinds of feelings help me to understand the story when someone's sitting across from me pouring their guts out. How do you learn those feelings in a psych course? I wasn't interested in doing things the way that they'd been done or what other people's approaches were. I wanted to find my way to do this. When I've had personnel tell me, I am no longer suicidal because of you. When I've straightened people out who have gone through the gamut, years of counseling, self-medicating in every way known to man, their gun in and out of their mouths. When they've had enough, that's when they come to me. I don't really know why, but that's the way it's been. I get tough cases. When you can have them say, I feel brand new and it's only been 6 weeks, you know you're doing something right. Great quote. You've never lived until you've almost died. As for our freedom, for those of us who have fought for it, life has a flavor the protected will never know. Anonymous. Agreed. I also know that something else most civilians think they understand and may not is unconditional love. Part of the camaraderie that is the bond that fuses combat units together and why military buddies often take priority over families is the level of love that exists for someone you've been in battle with. This is a talked about idea, the concept of the brotherhood, but most people don't get it, and instead resentment often arises because it's misunderstood. Continuing in the vein of things loved by soldiers, woobies. I have a woobie. I love my woobie. It's almost a take the car but leave the woobie kind of situation. I think the woobie is one of the most important things ever made. I first bought my woobie, which isn't a woobie, in Canada, by the way. It's a ranger's blanket. Because there was a period in my life where I was doing a lot of vision quests. My background is Mohawk, and I spent almost 20 years learning ceremonies. Nothing I would rather have in the woods with me than my woobie, and a hatchet, and some matches, and food, but my woobie I would never be without. It rides in the trunk of my car. Those of us who have been out in the woods all night realize just how cold and dark it really is before dawn. And what a magical time it is. You have to spend some time in the dark to really, really appreciate the light. Often people would question why I would want to do this learning, this work, these ceremonies, which meant going without food and water for days, being alone, often wet, cold, in the dark. Vision questing is about being alone and realizing you are never alone because spirit is always around you. Being in the dark and being in your own darkness and negotiating with all of that and not being afraid. It challenges the deep parts of you to go deeper, find connection, become okay with the isolation and the darkness. Sounds like good fun, right? It's not camping. It's awakening. It's expanding. It's spirit level work. Most people would never do this. They don't like the dark or being alone, would never choose to sit by the fire for days in order to become more. But the warrior knows why this work is important. There have always been parallel paths that the warrior and the shaman walk. So both know what it's like just before dawn and how incredible the moments before are, the build up, the glow that is so welcome. It's been a long, cold night. Big sigh of relief. Watching now as it spreads takes a long time, but you wouldn't be anywhere else. Bigger sun, warmth starting to become real, shadows. Looking around, seeing things differently. Made it. New day. Till next time, love and light. Stay safe. Peace out.